Hi all, I just wanted to give you guys a quick review of this week's task list, and I actually wanted to go back to last week's PowerPoint because I am asking you to reference it in one of your posts this week. So this week's task list, as always, you can find it in Google Classroom under week 7. So it's the week 7 task list. And as I've promised, I've kept it light, or I hope it's um, less demanding of you because you do have the vocabulary game due October 21st. And I did send out a video, probably not my best work, I'm sorry about that, in trying to explain what the vocabulary what the expectations are around the vocabulary game. And basically, the expectation is really just the write up, so the game pieces that you'll be using, and your explanation of the game. But again, I'll remind you, there is no expectation that you would have actually had time to play this with your students. I just think that some of you don't necessarily have that kind of access, and we don't have that kind of time um, to play the game and then be able to do the write up. So what I'm actually expecting for the vocabulary game is just that you make the game pieces and that you practice creating the game, and hopefully next semester you can actually play the game with students, or if you have time this semester, it would be wonderful. So anyway, without further ado, this week's this week's task list is, again, the vocabulary will be due October 21st. The only thing that you have to do for this week is that you have to read visualizing vocabulary article, and watch a video, a teaching channel video of doing vocabulary instruction. And what you'll see is that it's very different from what we uh, tend to do, which is that we pre-teach vocabulary. So this is pretty innovative, and maybe not everybody will love the idea of it, but if you see it in action, I think that you will understand that at the very least how it is implemented and the theory behind it. Now, the visualizing vocabulary article is probably one of my favorite articles of the course, notwithstanding some of the other feminist literature and the other wonderful articles that we've read. But this article in particular, when we look at vocabulary, um, does an amazing job of explaining how to make vocabulary meaningful, and the strategies that the author, who is a teacher, provides um, in in really explaining to students and engaging students with meaningful vocabulary work is amazing. So, and I can say that I've actually tried out these strategies. This one, for example, is inconceivable, as you can see, and it's a study on prefix suffixes, root words, and then the drawing itself of the word. So, and if you go through this document, you'll see this is what's called an opposite card, and the word is drawn out. So haughty is drawn out because somebody that's haughty is all, they think they're perfect, versus somebody that's humble. So if we think about the importance of vocabulary, and building student vocabulary, and then engage in vocabulary work that's meaningful and that provides many different areas for tackling important pieces of vocabulary, you'll see how great the strategies are. So I highly advise that you take a good look at that. And then the post is very easy. You should just name the most innovative strategy you read about and discuss how you'd implement it. And also discuss the video, the teaching channel video, which is linked here. And make at least one reference to last week's PowerPoint presentation. And I know that sometimes the PowerPoint presentations you might just quickly go through, so I try to make sure that you have a chance to revisit some of those. So I think vocabulary is one of the areas that students need the most help in, but is actually the easiest for them to make gains in. Um, and there are a lot of there's a lot of disheartening information around vocabulary, um, because the correlation between low vocabulary and reading ability is indeed very sizable. So if kids come into school with um, a limited vocabulary, it tends to just stay limited and then increasingly becomes worse because their peers are so fat. Their peers are indeed moving ahead of them. But I say that it's so some of the information that we know about vocabulary is extremely disheartening. But then what we do know is that they can make great gains if you engage them in meaningful vocabulary. And it's an easy thing to target. So what we do know is that middle class children hear 2,000 words per hour versus children living in poverty that might hear about 600 words per hour. So by the time a first grade student is in school, um, their peers, their peers that are in a higher SES know 2 times the words that the children in a lower SES group. And then by the time that high school seniors, the ones that are at the top of their class, they know as many as 4 times more words than low performing students. And it's this notion of becoming linguistically disadvantaged. So children of low SES groups, students of color, second language learners, and children with specific language disabilities um, have partial knowledge of word meanings, confuse words that sound similar but differ in just 1 or 2 phonemes, and they know only one meaning or function of a word when there might be several. And a good example of that might be something as simple as the word rock. So most of our students know like a tier 1 version of the word rock. A rock, right? It's just a rock. Um, but very few of those students, if pressed, would be able to give you rock and roll. Rock as in the music, as in a music, as in a genre of music. They wouldn't be able to tell you the colloquial term for, oh, that's a really nice rock in terms of an engagement ring. And that's just one simple example. So most of our students know the meaning of, even if they know a word, they know just one meaning or function of the word when there might be several of them. So, so what we know about children's vocabulary in the first grade is that students with higher SES know 2 times as many words as children from lower SES. Um, so obviously it's not good. And this is where the Matthew effect comes in, and it's from it's from the Bible, and basically the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So kids that come in and have vocabulary acquisition that is already um, behind their peers in first grade, it only becomes worse as they progress in school. So it's really a vicious cycle. Children with limited vocabulary to read slowly and without enjoyment obviously read less. So these deficits continue to grow. They come in first grade. They don't have the kind of vocabulary that they should, and then the deficits continue to grow as they then start reading less and less. And this is, and I'm sure you've seen so many of these kids already in your classrooms. They avoid reading. Um, they become less. They find less and less pleasure in reading because it becomes so much more difficult for them. So if you go through the rest of the PowerPoint, you'll see that there's much we can do. Um, to help students make vocabulary gains. And the most important thing is rich and thoughtful vocabulary instruction. Also, know that you shouldn't be teaching more than 7 words a week because there's no way that they would retain more than 7 words a week. There should be attention, even in high school, to decoding instruction. Your readers should be matched with the right text. So having students read at frustration level all of the time is certainly not recommended, of course. Fluency instruction, and we'll get into fluency next week, but fluency instruction, prosody, um, having students read to each other, uh, and conduct reading tests, which again we'll get into next week with fluency. um, those are the ways that we can really attack uh, vocabulary instruction and engage them in more meaningful instruction. So with older students, lots of practice in appropriately leveled texts with support. So provide text that they can read with 90% accuracy. And it's so easy now to look up Lexile levels for students and ensure that your curriculum is includes text that they can actually read at a 90% accuracy. And again, this is where the beauty of text sets come in. If you have students that need to read a mentor text that is way beyond their Lexile level, the text sets that you use should help get you there. Direct systemic instruction of tier 2 words, and you will be reading an article by Isabel Beck this week. It's part of your readings, and she explains tier 2 words, tier 3 words, and tier 1 words. And tier 1 words would be words like door, wall, and tier 2 words are the word are it. That's where you want to concentrate most of your vocabulary instruction. So as I mentioned before, the rest of this PowerPoint is really very self-explanatory, and I just provide you with some examples of more meaningful vocabulary instruction. And again, there is the video of Kate Garnett playing the vocabulary game. So if we can go back to this week's task list, after you create the post, which references the PowerPoint that we just reviewed, you should be reading these 2 articles. One of them is by Engage New York, and the other is the Beck article that I mentioned, and she is the one that goes over and explains the different tiered levels of teaching vocabulary and how to do that. So it's a great article. And finally, the response to that is called a BHH response. So what's in the book, what's in your head, and what did you take? What did you take to heart? So this is an extremely simplified version of this. In terms of what I'm expecting for the response, it's literally just this, but I highly encourage all of you to visit this Disrupting Thinking blog by Scholastic, and purchasing the book. It's just marvelous. And again, it's just another strategy for us to engage our struggling readers and create access points for them. So if you run through here, this is the book. I would highly advise you get it. But the basis of it is really setting up your readers to think beyond the text. And she gives an example here of a unit that deals with virtues, wealth, social family, status. So you set up students, and again, this goes back to what I hope we've been thinking about as we move through this course, is that we should really be planning thematically. And I know for those of us that are just, and I don't say just, but that our special ed teachers, and that we're not in a legitimate co-teaching situation, we're not thinking about that because we're not doing the planning. But if you are in a legitimate co-teaching situation, and you can work with the the other teacher, the gen ed teacher in the room, then you should aim to lesson plan and create curriculum that is theme based, and that way you can bring in text sets. I hope that this was helpful, and I look forward to texts and emails.